Okay, so this is the start of the second video on the topic that I've started for this week for the history part of how we can prove the Bible is the inspired Word of God. Just here briefly in this video, I'd like to talk about a few things. Talk about how the city was before it was destroyed. Then I'd like to talk about what happens when the prophecy is fulfilled and how it was fulfilled. And then, hopefully, if I have enough time, I'd like to talk a little bit about some questions that were around this prophecy. So, to get us started, talk about the city itself. During the time of Ezekiel, the city was a very thriving city. It was well known for its manufacturing and trade within the city. It was located about north. It was located northeast, about 100 miles off from the city of Jerusalem, close to the Mediterranean Sea, and which was why it was so convenient for the trade routes and the manufacturing. In fact, in Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 4, it states that thy borders are in the midst of the seas, thy builders have perfected thy beauty, which goes to show that they perfected their manufacturing and their trade, that they were very good at what they were doing. And then also in the same book, 27 verses 3 through 11, it actually goes into showing the materials that they sold and the ones that they used for their manufacturing and their trade. So whenever you get the time, that'd be another good one to read. 27 verses 3 through 11 in the same book of Ezekiel. Um, but it's like I said, they were very luxurious. They were very thriving, very rich city. Manufacture or materially, they had everything you could possibly ask for. On the other hand, spiritually though, that was a whole different matter. They were very arrogant, very self-conceited. Just they only thought of themselves. And in fact, in the same book of Ezekiel, I believe it's in it's in same chapter, chapter 26, verses 2 and 3. The Lord Himself actually says, "Behold, Tyre, I am against you. Uh, I, I'm just not for you." Uh, and then also in Ezekiel 28, verse 16 and through 18, it goes into talking about how you defiled your sanctuaries by multitudes of your iniquities. Um, Talking about how they went in and defiled the worship of God and stuff like that. So, needless to say, this city was a very bad city. It was a very unspiritual city. Um, God was against them. So that's why God had Ezekiel tell this prophecy in the book to show what was going to happen to Tyre, that God was going to utterly destroy them and put them into the midst of the sea. So, chronologically, Nebuchadnezzar was the one who laid siege on the city first. Um, Took him 13 years to actually get through to the city. But he was the one who built siege mounds on the walls, which I've stated before in the last video. And he just completely and utterly just almost pretty much destroyed the city, almost. But when he finally gets into the city, though, he came across a problem. This problem was the fact that when he finally entered the city, there was nothing there. There was no plunder, there was no food, there was nothing. But the reason why for that is that the people of Tyre had an island city. It was about 3 to 5 miles or so off from the actual city of Tyre, the land city of Tyre. And what they would do is, whenever a problem like this arose, they would transfer everything that they had over to that island city and make it to where so that they can go out and lay siege on that city. So it was a pretty smart idea. But Nebuchadnezzar gave up, and which actually leads to one of the questions that hopefully at the end of this video I'll go over. So now to actually go to how the prophecy was fulfilled. About 230 to 240 years later, in the year 333 AD, a man that was very well known in our history today. You can find him in all of our history books pretty much. This man, in fact, he cried at the end of his journey and stated that there was no more world to conquer. This man's name is the name known as Alexander the Great. Well, at his time, there was one instance where he goes to the city of Tyre and he asks the people of the city to allow him to come in to worship one of his gods. The city, on the other hand, was still arrogant and very cocky. So they told Alexander that there was no way they were going to let him in, that he was not allowed to come into their city. So what he does is that he goes in and lays siege on this city, which actually fulfills one of the prophecies talking about many nations, because at this time he had already conquered many, many nations, and they were all working under him. So when he finally enters the city 7 months later, he goes in and comes across the exact same problem that Nebuchadnezzar came across. There was nothing in the city. Tyre had done exactly the same thing that they had done to Nebuchadnezzar and switched everything over from their old city and put it into their island city. Now, being Alexander the Great, he wasn't going to do like Nebuchadnezzar did and just give up. He was actually going to utterly destroy the city, which is exactly what he did. What he did was that he took every stone, every brick, every stick you could find in that city, used everything from the ground up, and threw it all into the sea and made a large landmass bridge. Now, it took him forever to finally get this done because of different instances that happened, such as there was one where this giant hurricane or it was either a hurricane or tornado, that came in and swooped up the part of the bridge right when he was about to finish the bridge. Then you've got stuff like the city that was very well fortified that would attack them while they were building on the bridge. And then they also had a lot of Navy soldiers that would go out to their ships and attack them that way too. Luckily for Alexander, though, he also had his own navy set up so that they would fight for him while he was building on the bridge. But when he finally got this bridge built, he used every single last ounce of that city, walked across that bridge, and took over the island city of Tyre. And if he didn't kill you, he would sell you into slavery, which normally around that time it would usually be about children, some women, but the majority of the city he utterly destroyed. He didn't leave anything. So, with that being said, that fulfills the prophecy that Ezekiel talks about in chapter 26, saying that I would lay the city into the midst of the waters, which shows that because Alexander took the city and threw it into the sea and made this huge landmass, that fulfills that part of the prophecy. Now, to prove this point, I can't remember exactly what the man's name was, but there was a man who wrote a journal. It was in 1172, the year 1172. He goes to the new city of Tyre, which answers one of the questions that I'm about to bring up. But he writes in his journal about how when you go up to the top of the new city of Tyre and you look out to where the island city used to be, you can actually see inside the water the old city of Tyre, the ancient city of Tyre. And if you were to take a ferry out and ride it across that small path to that island city, you could actually look down into the water and see the marketplaces. You could see different house parts that were laid out into waste, you can see it all.